But he was like, let's just do a challenge. And so it was myself, him, and a group of his friends. And then he and I were the only ones that stuck with it for a month. It was 30 days, no sugar, like literally looking at every label.
You are now listening to The Living Numbers and Tony Rambles. Tony Rambles. Tony Rambles. Rambles. And the Living Numbers Podcast.
This is The Living Numbers Podcast, and I am your host, Tony Rambles. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening, no matter where it may be, Spotify, YouTube, Apple, Breaker, wherever it is. Thank you for making The Living Numbers Podcast a part of your day. And as you all can see or hear, I have a wonderful, esteemed guest on today. And I cannot wait to introduce you all to Dr. Z, as she is affectionately known as. Here we go. Hailing from Jacksonville, Florida, this serial student is a third-generation educator. Although she earned her Bachelor's of Arts from Florida A&M University and Master's of Education from Columbia University, she obtained her doctorate from Fordham University in religion with concentrations in research focuses on social justice issues, sociology, and community development. Wow, that was a lot to say. She has so much education. I think there's a degree that I missed. So correct me if I'm wrong. This master researcher has worked on campaign trails and as a professor at her alma mater, Florida A&M. Author, filmmaker, surrogate career counselor, and social justice champion who always keeps it real, Dr. Zakiya Akerele.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I like that. I might have to have you write some of my intros for other things.
Hey, I can do it. It just kind of, and I'm sure you've probably picked the brains of other great people and great things that you watch and see and hear. And so I listened to this podcast called The Low Post. It's a sports podcast, but it's amazing. It's one of the best ones out there. But whenever he has a guest on, he like gives this intro, and I'm like, man, that's so cool for people to kind of get an introduction to who this person is before the episode even starts. So I was like, I guess if I could do enough research and pull enough cool things from their social media, whatever podcast they've been on, I think I could put something cool together. So I started doing that, and it's like one of my favorite things to do.
Nice.
Did I miss anything in there? I know I missed one master's because you got 4.
That's okay. No, it was a master's, but it was fine. It was also another master's in the same area that I got my PhD from Fordham. Yeah, so it's easy to miss.
I was listening to you on another podcast, and I think it was like called Being Black or something to that nature. It was really good. The guy did a really good interview. Yeah, he did a great job, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And you use this term surrogate career counselor, and I was like, man, so many of us could use somebody like that. Like, I teach this, but trust me, let me talk to you about some other stuff. So please, I'll introduce our first number here, and then I'll let you roll. Okay. So first number is 3 hours.
Okay.
Because I read this article, and this guy was a son of a teacher. And he said he usually got to school an hour before everybody, and they left 2 hours after everybody because his mom worked at the school that he went to. So talk about your experience kind of from that early age of being exposed to education, and with your mother, and then I believe is your grandmother, were both educators. So take it away, Dr. Z.
Yeah, so my grandmother was an elementary school teacher. I recall being in elementary school, probably at the same time she was teaching, and being with her at her home, grading papers, looking over stuff, as if I was like, her assistant teacher.
Mm-hmm.
My mother actually owned a early learning development center for many years. And when you talk about those hours, 3 hours is not even, I remember being, before the sun rose, I was at the daycare center with her, opening the doors, and I was being young myself, that wasn't the most fun. And having to be there after the last child was picked up, having to be there, even sometimes parents were so late, especially my mom's learning center being in the community. So when parents had to work multiple jobs, sometimes they'd be like, can you take our kid home with you all? And
what?
Oh, yes, a few times. And, it was more like a family. It was like, okay, sure. I know you're running late, then we'll have them spit, till you get off. So literally that was her life from sun up to sundown. And I was a part of that as well. Actually, the first name of the Learning Center was named after me. And then she ended up subsequently changing the name to something else. But yeah, so everybody, even when I went to school, they'd be like, I know that name. I used to see it off that Learning Center off the bookstore. I'm like, yeah, that's my mom's place. Yeah.
So you basically had like this extended family of kids that you were always around.
And it's so interesting now because I was older than them. They were preschoolers and I was always older than them, even though I might have been in elementary or middle school at the time myself. So it was kind of like I was a big sister. And it's interesting now because I'm still in touch with them, and like to see them be adults with their own children. And I'm like, you were in pajamas at my place after your mom could pick you up, or what have you. And I'm like, wow, time really does fly. But yeah, it's been in my blood forever to be a part of education in some kind of way.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like so much fun. I'm a high school teacher myself, so I don't get to school an hour early, but I definitely, as a coach and a sponsor of clubs, and just kind of somebody who enjoys the place that I work at. So like, I don't mind spending the extra time, even though sometimes I am obligated. But I mean, my wife will tell anybody, like, there are days, especially with sports, where I have to drive the bus. So I may be gone 45 minutes down the road. And so there and back, that's an hour and a half. So that doesn't even include the game. That doesn't even include getting there early, to get warmed up and all of that stuff. So there are some really late nights at times, but I tell people, like, I love it all. I love it all because when you find what you want to do, it really makes a difference in your attitude and your feeling about the work. So at this time, I want to talk about just education as a whole. So this is going to kind of move us into our next number. And 52% of K through 12 teachers are reportedly feeling burnt out. Okay. So I know education is huge for you as far as your research and the things that you've studied and taught. If you had unilateral power, no one could say no. No one could take your budget away. You could do whatever you want. What would you do to change education? So you could start from K through 12. You could go university. You can have a whole new plan if you want to. What would you do to change education?
Oh, goodness.
Unilateral power.
Well, one of the things, education begins to me, I believe, in the womb, right? But even more so directly after birth, right? We all start learning. So one of the first things I would do, especially in America, is give mothers at least 2 years off of maternity leave. I say 2. People say, oh, 6 months, a year, that's cute. That's fine. I would say 2 years. The reason why is because I myself, I am a homeschool mom. I'm a proponent for homeschool. But even those that don't feel that they can be homeschoolers, because I understand people like, I can't teach my kids, send the professionals. I get that. Seriously, I get that. But at least when they're newly arrived, to have as much time as possible to bond, for you yourself as a mother to heal, grow, get used to having the new a new addition to the family. At minimum, I would say a year, but if I had unilateral power, I would say 2 years, because one of the things, even when I was a professor, I would sometimes have young parents in my class, and they would have to send their children off. And I would say, listen, if you can't, bring them to class. If you can't, send them to daycare. If you can't, and I would have mothers, and I would even have had fathers who had issues with childcare. So I know that school, I can only imagine when they're in their career and might need to make some choices. So I'm a big proponent of extended maternity and even paternity leave, so that there's more bonding time. So to me, that's a part of education. Even in higher education, first thing, the student loans out the door. I do not want
to get them out of here.
Yeah. So I think those are two things. I know they're on the opposite ends, birth to adulthood, but those are two main things. I don't want people to end up in debt. That's one of the things that is something that I'm on a mission, get people to stop taking out student loans. And if they have already done so, how do they pay them back? So those are two main key things.
But that, I mean, you're talking about the beginning of education as an infant, but also you're taking care of the parent, because I know personally right now, my son turns 1 in like a week. So this first year, I mean, especially like the first like 2 or 3 months is a major transition. Yes. No matter how great you are with your spouse, no matter how lockstep, because I feel like our relationship is really good. Our marriage has been great, all 9 years of it. And it was a huge transition for us. And it was the summertime. So I'm at home and she's at home. So we're able to be there, and still, I mean, it's a huge learning curve. And so once the summer ends and I go back to work, and my wife is somebody who always feels like she needs to carry her weight. Like she doesn't want to ever feel like she's just being dragged along. Like she always like I gotta have some purpose. Like I gotta be, and I love that strong will about her. But I know because I could have used some extra time off to be able to be with our son and to kind of figure our home out. Because you notice too. 1 and 2 months is different than like month 5, 6, and then that's different from month 11 and 12.
Yes, definitely. I know my youngest is 19, almost 20 months now. And literally last week she was a different human being. And now she's having these hollering fits that I didn't even experience with my first son. So it's literally week from week, you see differences in them as they grow, but especially when they're infants. The transitions are so frequent. Yeah.
You just see one step and then the next step, you're like, oh, like, dang, like he's smiling at us. And then like, oh, he yelling at us. And then it's like, oh, he's swinging on us now. Like, what is happening? Yeah. So you talked about the transition at the beginning, and then you also talked about the transition at the end, which is what kind of got me into education. Is you graduate high school and it's like, all right, now what? You know, do I go to college? Do I not go to college? And for me, in our home, college wasn't like a big emphasis. It's like you should go to college. Great job. Go to college if you can, but if not, we got this job over here for you. And my dad works in construction safety. My stepmom did the same thing. Good money, but if it's not what you want to do, and this is for anything, eventually you get to a place where you go, okay, maybe I need to go to college. I think that's just kind of how we're programmed over here. Is like, if I don't want to do this, maybe going to college will help me to get further along in life. And so from there, I want to pivot into your documentary And so I call you a filmmaker because you are. And I watched it last night, and it was like a lot of those same questions was like the same things that I was going through in my own mind, where you're like, okay, like, do I take this student loan out? Well, if I don't take it out, am I like, I can't go to college if I don't take this. Now what? Where do I go? So now talk about your documentary, and then I also want you to talk about like the filmmaking process, because I'm really interested in that as well.
Yeah, so my documentary was Degrees of Separation, and it was named after an awareness campaign that I created right after, not say right after, I think about 2 years or so after I finished my doctorate. I was going through these ebbs and flows in my career where I didn't get hired right after I finished my doctorate in 2010. And which is also in connection to why I wrote the book, but we'll talk about that later. But I was like looking at why is it that I'm not getting hired? What's going on? Of course, it was a recession, so everybody was challenged in some way. But then I was researching and I saw that many recent college graduates and even people with graduate degrees were struggling with employment. So I called it degree separation. My background is in religious studies. So I've studied world religions, but also philosophy. My bachelor's is in that. And so one of the things that I was fascinated by was the whole idea of 6 degrees of separation, which people, they've heard of before, they've seen the movie, but they don't know like the history behind that. And so it comes from a story where it's a fictitious story about a guy writes a story about how everybody in the world is connected by 6 intermediaries or less. And so the theory was, I can get you connected to anyone in the world, just by you knowing that person and that person knowing that person. And so I think it was the 1960s, a psychologist tested this theory based on this play that was written called Chains, and tasked people to mail a letter to a famous person, but they had no connection to him. And a good percentage of the people ended up getting, I don't know if it was a letter or a box. It's in my book. I don't know why I can't remember it was a letter or a box, but anyway, it got to the person. And so it basically was saying that everybody's connected. It's who knows who. And so I basically I created this documentary saying that it's the degrees of separation that gets you. It's the connections that'll get you, but it's also a play on words, which is the degrees themselves are disconnecting us from what we need, because we're focusing on that piece of paper and not what it takes, right? Which is your connections, your skills, your talents, or whatnot. And I primarily focused on African Americans because we have a higher unemployment and underemployment rate. So if we have the same education as our white counterparts, we have at least at the time, a 50% higher unemployment rate. And I think at the time I was doing the research and starting the documentary, it was almost 56% underemployment rate with college degrees. So it's kind of like, okay, you have the degree, now what? Why are you still challenged to get employment? And that's why I did the documentary. I wanted it to be more expansive and farther. It was just taking so long. I was like, I gotta just at least get the message out. So I had myself and some of my colleagues at the time that were in Tallahassee, which is a college town. FAMU was there, FSU was there, a big community college, TCC is there. So I got people from the education community to talk about their experiences as either educators or individuals who have a degree and experience joblessness. And that was the whole premise behind the documentary, is what are the challenges as African Americans that we face that are unique to the job market after getting our degree? And then what are some tangible solutions like entrepreneurship that we could look into to alleviate the job, unemployment and underemployment?
What was your favorite part about making the film?
Just getting the message out, right? Because we hear one thing: go to college so you can be successful. The end of conversation. And I wanted the message to be out there. One, that that's not the only way to success. And I wanted people to hear it from people like myself, like Dean Daryl Scriven, who was there. He's the dean of a business school up in New York, or the dean of the business department or college up there. And also we had a lawyer who was a lawyer for the federal government, like people who are degreed and esteemed, to say, hey, that's not the only option. But also to let people know they're not alone, because I felt very alone when I was struggling. And when I didn't have a job with a PhD, I felt like I was the only person on earth with this challenge.
Yep. Like this some bull crap right here.
Yeah. So I wanted people to know you are not alone. This is a real issue, but I don't want people to be stuck complaining about the issue. I want them to know that there are solutions out there.
Yeah, one of the stories that you told was like you took one of your degrees off of your resume, or I don't remember if it was just one, but I know you said you took your PhD off because you were like, people were talking about how I'm overqualified and I can't get these jobs. And one of the guys on the documentary also said, like, people won't hire you because you're overqualified, and they know once you find something better, you'll just leave. And I was like, dang, that's terrible. And then
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go.
What you said just reminded me of something that I don't think I've really shared publicly, but I was sharing it with my husband recently. So I remember finishing my doctorate and maybe some months later still not finding steady work, right? So this was a whole other job, not the one I mentioned in the documentary, but I also had a separate CV with nothing on it. Like, as far, it had like 1 or 2 degrees, that's it. And I got hired to work in a nonprofit, right? Of course, I was completely overqualified for it, but they didn't know it. And I think even with the education that I did leave on, I was still overqualified, right? But they hired me. And so I'm working, I'm doing a good job, And really, one of the main reasons why the job was challenging is because I had to travel like an hour and a half. I was in New York at the time, an hour and a half via subway. So that was like from Brooklyn to Queens to work, right? And I wasn't getting paid much, but I was like, I'm gonna take whatever I can take to have some money in my bank account. And eventually, in line with what you were saying about leaving, so I eventually needed to leave, but it wasn't because, I thought I was too good. It was because of the travel time. So I ended up quitting, and I never told anyone why. I just was like, it's time for me to move on. But as I was leaving, I overheard the manager looking through resumes of people who they wanted to hire for another role. And they saw on that person's resume, oh, she's a PhD student. What does she want with this job? And they were just talking mess. And I was like, okay, should I like reveal myself? And to stick up for this person, because you don't know why she needs this job. She actually made it, right? So I said, hey, I have a PhD. And they looked like, what? And I said, yeah. So all this time, and so I had to explain to them, like, you never know why someone is applying for a job. Clearly, they feel like they need it. And if they will be a good fit, don't discriminate against them because they have more education. And, see why it is that, or how would they be of value to this organization. And so we left it there with no hard feelings, but I felt like I needed to let that out.
Isn't that funny how sometimes we feel the need to defend a person that we don't know, that we've never seen before, that has nothing to do with us, but it's kind of like, it's the principle of the matter. And then you over here and you talking this way. It's like, well, time out. I'm kind of that person.
Right.
Like, you don't even really talking about me, honestly.
Yeah.
There was another story that you told. And I found all these stories very interesting because there's just always something about these stories where we can all pull something from it. So you're talking about being in school and this kid who was a friend of yours wanted to be a plumber. And they just knew it. And I use that story because as a high school teacher, you have some kids that want to do like whatever it is. I tell the kids, I'm like, okay, this is what my advice is to you. Try to figure out what you want to do. Do the best that you can, learn, research. Now, ease of access to information has made it so much easier to at the very least, be able to see what the details of the jobs are, because there are people with YouTube channels that will tell you everything about this job.
Right.
So as long as you are willing to look, and you don't even have to look that hard, honestly, you can kind of find some stuff out. So you talked about the, I'll let you tell the story. You tell the story, then I'll jump back in.
This is actually a story because this was 22 years ago, okay, that I experienced this, but it has stayed with me all that. I will never forget this story. And I put it in my book, actually. It was a friend of mine in high school who was adamant that he wanted to be a plumber. And, I'm a millennial. And so it was expected for pretty much all of us at my high school. Go to college, at least have the aspiration to go. And so the teacher, I remember it being an elective, like we were taking some elective like psychology. I don't even know how we were taking that in high school, but whatever. He went around to each student and said, what are your plans? It was our senior year. What are your plans? Everybody, I'm gonna be a lawyer, I'm gonna be a doctor, I'm gonna go to school and do this, whatever. Got around to my friend and he said, I'm gonna go and become a plumber. I'm gonna go to trade school and become a plumber. And the teacher just was like, stop playing. This is I'm serious. What do you want to be? He's like, I want to be a plumber. My friend didn't understand what's the problem. And the teacher really thought that he was joking. So myself and another friend of mine had to say, no, he's told us in a private conversation he wants to be a plumber. His uncle is a plumber and does really well for himself and he enjoys it and da-da-da. So then the teacher kind of was like, okay, and moved on. But it took standing up for him for the teacher to move on. If not, he thought he was just being a class clown. And I always thought that was very strange because I was like, well, what's wrong with being a plumber? Even though at the time I had aspirations to become a lawyer, which someone would consider maybe a more high value job or whatnot. Everybody needs a plumber. Everybody. So,
that's the funny part.
Yeah, exactly. So if nobody wants to be a plumber, then what's going to happen when you need one? So anyway, I just did not understand why people saw certain professions as more valuable than others, even though I've come from a family that many people before me were educated. Even into the 1800s, I can trace family back that had medical degrees, and that was very strange, or not say strange, rare for people to have, even African Americans to have. So I come from people who have had higher education degrees, but I still never looked down on other professions,
It's important because, like what we just said, everybody needs those people, and it's a status thing. Like you could be making a lot of money, but once you say, I'm a plumber or I'm a mechanic or something that's one of these kind of dirty jobs that doesn't take having a college degree, because I'm not going to say it doesn't take higher education, because you have to learn those skills. You have to learn your trade. That's higher education. Exactly. And so those jobs are looked down upon because of the kind of work that it is, instead of saying, you know what, shoot, that person is successful in what they want to do. And I tell my kids, back to that point, I tell my kids, whatever it is, just go for it. Whatever it is, go for it. Do your research, put the work in. If there's anything that you can do right now that's going to help prepare you for that job, start doing it right now. Because we have a career research project that we do at the end of every semester. Because I teach professional communications, right? But I teach so much more than that. Kind of like you, Dr. Z. It's not just about, do you know how to speak in front of people? Like, that's cool. Like, that's part of it. But I'm trying to teach life skills that transfer across no matter what job you want to get into, no matter what crowd you may be around. How are you able to build those connections? How are you able to maybe be the smartest person in the room, but make other people feel like they're the smartest person in the room? Like, these are the things that you need to understand about people and how to navigate. And I know you talked about that on other platforms as well. So it's very important, like whatever it is, to the people out there, me and Dr. Z, we're telling you right now, whatever it is, just go for it. Whatever it is, go for it with all you got. And then if it doesn't work, that's okay. Like now it's time to change. Let's whatever the next thing is, let's go for that. Let's make a plan.
Because colleges are shutting down. They're going to always be there. So you can always enroll in the school.
They will take your money no matter when you want to give it to them. Mm-hmm. So you've got you dump your degree book back there for anybody who's watching this on YouTube. And so we're going to talk about your book now. Mm-hmm. But our next number here is 5. Okay. Now this part I did not put in the notes because I wanted to see if you could guess this.
Okay.
So the 5 best-selling ebook categories on Amazon.
Okay.
I want you to take some guesses.
5 best-selling ebook categories?
Categories. Yep, just categories, genres. Your book falls into
one of them?
At least one of them.
So Amazon has so many categories, that's going to be hard. But I know
take like 3 guesses.
Self-help or self-improve, like self-development. Okay.
That's one.
Yeah. That's I would probably something.
Some of this stuff is in your wheelhouse.
Is career. My next guess will be religion or spirituality.
That's one of them.
That's one. Okay, so I got one. I don't know. Oh goodness.
Career is kind of on the right track.
Business.
Yep, you got 3.
Really? Okay, yeah. And you said 5. Oh goodness, I thought it was 3. Okay.
This is something like everybody does. Everybody has to do it.
Eat food.
Food.
Really?
See, I knew it wouldn't be that hard. And you got one more. This one might be a little harder.
And it's related to books, but a genre?
Mm-hmm. It's getting bigger now. There are even people making like shows and movies. It's always been a thing, but I think it's kind of popping right now.
I wouldn't be able to
guess. Want me to tell you?
Yeah.
Biographies and memoirs.
Really? No, I wouldn't have gotten that. I was going to go somewhere like fantasy, sci-fi, something other. No, I wouldn't have gotten that. Okay.
I knew you would be able to at least get self-help. That's huge right now. Yeah. Everything, religion, because that's kind of your background. Yeah. And then everybody like to eat, and business is part of your kind of background too. So I'm like, I think she could probably get some of these.
Yeah. So okay.
So let's talk about your book, Dump Your Degree. What was the hardest part about writing the book?
One of the things, one, knowing what to say, right? Because I wanted something that more so my audience is Gen Z, current college students, maybe seniors in high school, that kind of thing. More so current college students, early career professionals, those who have not been tainted and gone through all the trials and tribulations.
Jaded people.
Right. So I want to catch you before you go through all of this. So that's one, but also, I wanted to give as much advice in a holistic way, right? So I talk about like how to plan your education, get mentorship, avoid or pay back student loans. I wanted to give at least an open door to those things so that once you finish, you're like, okay, now I know what I need to look for. So if I'm mentioning budgeting and negotiating your salary, I give you that advice, and now you take that advice and you run with it and find out what are the best ways for you to do that for your life, right? So giving enough examples, but also being transparent about my personal issues. So one of the things that I was so embarrassed about was, one, I was unemployed with 4 degrees. Having to go to the point where I had to apply for food stamps, living back at my mom's house with an Ivy League degree, like that was just for me to say.
Fordham, Columbia, like what are we talking about?
And I remember when I graduated from Columbia, I can't remember who, I want to say it was Ben Carson, was the keynote at the time, but I want to say it was the president of the university that said something to the effect of, oh, because you have a Columbia degree, you can pretty much do anything, go anywhere. Oh, and no, sir. Not only myself, right? Not only myself, but other peers that I went to Columbia with who had doctorates were also challenged, were also unemployed, were also underemployed, were in worse shape than I was, like literally on government assistance. And what people don't understand is that many, even in higher education, like adjuncts, because that's who was getting hired most, is the adjuncts. Adjuncts are not full-time. They they don't get benefits, right? The salary is low. I think if the last statistic I saw was that over half of or the adjuncts live below the poverty line, under the national average of poverty, right? If they're just living off of their adjunct salary. People are thinking, oh, this person is teaching me, they have PhD, and they're struggling. They're hungry, as we say where I'm from. So, so actually being transparent in my book and saying, like, I might not have went through all of those challenges, because I've literally met PhDs who were homeless and were former professors or whatever and struggling to find work. So having that transparency was tough for me, because I'm a very private, I'm extroverted, but I'm very private. Like, I'm not one of those people who loves to be like, oh, look at me on social media. Like, that's a challenge for me. Like, making a TikTok is like, oh gosh, I got to put a video.
Okay, let me stop you right there. I do this, but social media, oh my, like I'm right there with you. It's like, I have to, because of what I'm trying to do.
Exactly.
But just the chore of trying to stay with the trends and do it, because I don't care. I just want to do what I want to do.
I'm like, what's the new trend? Oh, I got to find some sounds. I got to, and I'm like, I don't want to put myself out there. I'm really an out of sight, out of mind person. I don't mind people not knowing what I'm doing. I don't mind it. But like you said, for my higher purpose and to do what I want to do, I have to use those platforms. So for me to even put my personal self out there in this book,
on Front Street,
yes, it was a challenge. And I said, well, you know what? And ironically, interestingly enough, people who have read either the introduction, or I give away a free chapter on my website, or seen the articles in the Root and Essence, I have been getting messages from people saying, this is my story. This is so relatable. And so it made me feel like, okay, I'm glad I did put that out there, because people need to know they're not by themselves,
And it's the difficult things in life. That's what really connect us. Like, it's cool to have people like that you play basketball with, or that you like the same music. But when you say, man, I've been homeless, and they go, dang, I've been homeless too. Like, those things, that is a deep connection, because it's hurt and it's pain involved. And when you can feel somebody else's pain because you've been there before, it's totally different connection that you have. So, I mean, you talked about that being the hardest part of just being vulnerable and putting yourself out there. And what is the part about writing a book that you're like, once I get past this part, like, I'm gonna be all right?
What part of that? Putting it up on on the internet for sale.
How'd that feel?
Oh, it felt so good. But even to today, like yesterday, I was overcoming obstacles, because I don't like to say but literally I have to tell myself every day, I'm big on what they call mind science, the power of your subconscious mind, those type of things. I have to affirm to myself constantly, everything is working out, because every day you'll have to go over a hurdle. And you have to be optimistic about the outcome. So even though the book was even up there, I was like, okay, I still need to do this, that, and the third, and I have to just remain positive. So it felt good to put it up there. And it feels even better that it's being well received as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like kind of putting this thing together, putting it out there and going, I hope people like it. Like, I hope it's good. Like, we have our own part of it where we go, I'm doing this for me. And, that sounds great. Okay. And that is part of it. But when you're putting it out there for public consumption, you do want people to like the stuff that you put together.
Yeah, you do. And then with the internet, the internet can be a very cruel place at times. And I'm like, and everybody's a critic, everybody's an expert, everybody could have did everything better than you did. So I know that I'm putting myself out there for that. And I'm learning, trying to figure out like how to put on the blinders, But so far, everything has been very positive, and I'm welcoming the feedback and the conversations that are being had around it. So things are good.
That's great. And that's actually a great transition to our next number and our next topic, which is 40 minutes. So every Tuesday, I have games. Like I'm in the basketball league, which I've been trying to do for the longest, but it's time and money. And so I'm in the basketball league. My friend JT, shout out to JT. She was on another episode. And that is kind of my release. That's my fun. That's when I can just go out there and hoop. I'm not a worrier by nature. But those are my highlights of my week. So it is important to have that other side, like we talked about earlier on, of like the why we do it, in that kind of release, the fun time after all the work is done. So what do you do for fun, Dr. Z?
So before all of this COVID and all of that, I used to travel. I love traveling. My goal is to, with my family, travel at least minimum 4 times a year to, internationally. Nice. I love reading. I'm big on book. Like, listen, I will lend you money before I will lend you a book, because I don't play about my book. If you don't get my book back, we have a problem. So I'm learning.
You a hard copy person?
You know what? I don't know. I mean, it just depends. I do like hardcovers. And also when I did my book, I made sure that I had 3 versions: ebook, hardcover, paperback, for whoever prefers whichever. But I think I am a softcover person now. Yeah. Because I think most of the books that I've read recently have been softcover.
But you want the physical book?
Oh yeah. No, I don't do ebooks. Y'all can buy it if y'all want to, but I need my I can't stand an ebook. I tried, and I literally have bought ebooks. I was like, man, get out of here. Let me just back it all over. I can't, no. Yeah, and I'm not an audiobook person either. I can't sit and listen. I need to see the words and have them soak in.
So. I've talked about when I like to be engaged. So for me to just sit and listen to something, like I'm going to want to do something. Like I need to do something. I always tell people this. I was at my cousin Taylor's wedding, and the wedding had stopped, and it was like in between the wedding and the reception, and they had food out there, but I'm like, I need something to do. Like why don't y'all have like a card table or something? Right. And I don't know. That's just my mind always wanting to do something, but the audio books and the ebooks, I'm like, nah, if I get that physical book in my hand, like I could sit and I could read. But if it's not that, it's so much more difficult for me. I want to ask this question. How did you get into reading? How did that become like one of your things to do?
I don't know. I mean, because you know what? I didn't see my parents really read as much. I know my father was very much into learning. And he didn't go to higher education at all, but I know that he was big on just learning about cultures and different things. So maybe that's part of it. My uncle, though, my uncle that I'm closest to, he's similar to me, books everywhere. So I know we talk and he'll recommend me books. Maybe that's part of it, but that wasn't even early on. Like, I think it's just something that just came to me naturally. And I used to always like to write, whether it was poetry or stories. It was just probably in me from the beginning. Yeah.
I try to get my kids in school. I'm like, just find something. Like it doesn't have to be this great educational or autobiography. Just find something to read, something that you like, something that's interesting. Because it's different. It's a different kind of engagement for your mind when you're reading, as opposed to watching a video or playing video games, which I love to do, or playing sports. It's just a different kind of engagement, and it makes you think. It makes you think reading. What are you reading right now?
Oh, so I was joking with my friend. I think I'm reading like 5 books at a time. I'm currently, as my laptop is propped up on the books that I'm reading. It's called a Practical Course in Creating Your Own Reality by Vadim Zeland. It's reality transurfing. So like using the power of your mind. I just picked up the biology of belief, which I'm really interested in getting into. So how just keeping, your mind focused can impact every part of your life. And you are the placebo. So, speaking about the placebo effect and like how people can literally shift their health based on their belief, but the book is talking about you yourself are the placebo. Like no one has to give you that pill, so to speak, but the power of your mind will create your reality. So I'm big on what they consider mind science, and those are three that I have picked up right now that I'm currently getting through.
Okay, Dr. Z, we're getting to the end here. Okay. And I like to end with my 3 whats. So they're going to be 3 what questions. You can answer them however you like, however you perceive the question. There are no wrong answers. They're your answers. So, first what? What's an opinion you have in your field or outside of it that will be considered unpopular?
Dump your degree. Like a college degree does not lead to success, nor is it essential for success. And that everybody should not go. It's not for everybody. So, and someone actually left me a Facebook post yesterday when they saw my book title. They were like, "Don't you have a PhD?" And I was like, "Better else to tell you to dump your degree." So
trust me. Okay, here we go. Next one. And this is hard to quantify, right? A lot of times I have guests on here that do a lot of stuff. And so the question is, I'll phrase it like this. If you didn't write a book about dumping your degree, would you have written a book about something else? It's not a what question. I had to change it. Okay, what?
Yeah, I would. This is just the beginning.
Yes.
I am big on, again, the power of the mind. So I plan to write books on how we create our own realities. I'm big on not focusing on problems, but solutions. So how to be your own solution. So a lot of that will be coming really soon.
Okay, hey, everybody look out. Dr. Z has more books in her. They are happening.
Yes.
That's exciting. I'm definitely going to, as an aside, bring this book to my classroom because these high school kids need to know it. They're like, I got to get into UT or it's over. University of Texas, or I got to get into A&M, or I got to get into this place or that place. I'm like, y'all, trust. Listen to me, please. But that's our culture. That's our country. So we're not going to jump back into that, but I will definitely have copies of this book on my shelves at school. Last one.
Okay.
What advice, fittingly, would you give to someone in high school?
This is the advice I give to everybody. Don't conform. That's my favorite thing. I don't believe people should follow other people's paths, that they should create their own. Of course, take advice, learn from the mistakes of others, but create your own reality and don't conform to other people's or society's reality or ideals for what you should be.
Nice. I think we could wrap up like those 3 what's with create your own reality. Can you talk a little bit about that before we get out of here? And then tell us where we can find you, website, social medias, and all of that stuff.
Yeah, create your own reality. Search within your own self. What do you enjoy? What are you passionate about? What do you feel your purpose is? And then develop yourself towards your ideal, right? Don't listen to what other people tell you that you should be or what you should do, but what it is that you feel good about, and then create your career, your personal life, and everything around that.
Put the work in, right?
Yes, exactly. And to your last question about where to find me, you can find me on ZakiyaAkerele.com. I am on Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Same at Zakiya Akerele. And my book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Books A Million, most online retailers, Apple Books. Pretty much everybody has the book.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I mean, I cannot thank you enough for coming on to the podcast. And I just knew, like, once I saw your stuff, I saw your Instagram, your TikTok, and I heard you on other stuff. I'm like, okay, this is gonna be good. This is gonna be real good. You get a feel for it, and then when we got on, we just started talking, and it was awesome. Thank you for coming on. I look forward to having you on again. Maybe you could come talk to my kids.
Yes.
Even over Zoom or Teams or whatever we can do to set it up. That would be great.
Yes.
So signing off for Dr. Zakiya Akerele. I was really trying to make sure that I got your name correct. I listened to it like 5 times or 6 times. I'm like, it's important to me. Names mean something. So, you know, we could say Dr. Z, but you better know how to say the whole thing. So this is your host, Tony Rambles, signing off for the Living Numbers podcast. Make sure you guys go follow me on Instagram and TikTok as well at _Tony Rambles _. You can follow the show on Facebook. I post a lot of the same content across platforms. You can email the show, oneTonyRambles@gmail.com. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, download. Okay, you can support the show. Give me money. This is not free. Hey, if you don't ask, like, how will people know? So you can definitely support on my Anchor page, anchor.fm/TonyRambles/support. And I think we're good. That was a great episode. All right.
Okay, it wrapped up. Okay.
Yeah, it's wrapped.
Okay, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation. It felt real and relatable. I appreciate that.
That's